There comes a moment in life when God whispers, nudges, or sometimes shakes you and says, it's time to let go. And when that moment comes, your first reaction is almost never excitement. It's fear, hesitation, and the thought that maybe you're about to lose something valuable. But letting go in God's timing is not about losing. It's about stepping into alignment with something much bigger than what your hands are gripping right now. Many people hold on because they don't want to feel empty. They're afraid of releasing the familiar, even when the familiar has stopped serving them. But God doesn't call you to let go to create emptiness in your life. He calls you to create capacity. He knows what's coming. He knows what's next. He knows the bigger blessing that requires your hands to be free. Letting go requires courage because it forces you to trust what you cannot see. You're standing in a place where everything feels uncertain, yet God is calling you to move anyway. That tension you feel, that's faith stretching you into a version of yourself that can carry more, handle more, and walk into more. Every time God asks for obedience, He's also preparing a blessing. Your obedience activates what your understanding never could. God doesn't wait for you to have details. He waits for you to have trust. Because trust is what keeps you steady when nothing around you makes sense. Letting go feels like losing control, but sometimes that's exactly what God needs from you. You've been carrying things you were never meant to manage alone. You've been trying to hold on to situations that were too heavy for your spiritual hands. God says, let it go so I can take it. When you finally release what God has been asking for, it doesn't create emptiness, it creates space. And God cannot pour new blessings into clenched fists. He waits until you loosen your grip, open your hands, and say, all right, God, I'm ready. Sometimes God has to take away what you refuse to let go of, not because He's harsh or punishing you, but because He knows that if He doesn't remove it, you'll stay stuck in places beneath your purpose. You'll cling to people out of comfort. You'll stay connected to habits that keep you small. You'll remain loyal to situations that drain you. When God removes something, the first reaction is confusion. You start asking questions like, why now? Why this? Why me? But what feels like loss is often divine protection. God heard conversations you weren't in. God saw the intentions you couldn't see. God understood the weight you didn't even know you were carrying. As long as you cling to what's unhealthy, God can't elevate you. Some blessings are locked behind obedience. Some breakthroughs only come when you stop fighting God and start flowing with Him. If you won't release it willingly, He'll reorganize your life for you. Removal is often the first sign of promotion. God clears out what was standing in the way of your growth. That friend who walked away, that job that ended, that door that closed, none of it caught God off guard. He simply moved what was blocking your path. You may not realize it now, but everything God removes is connected to something He is preparing. Nothing leaves your life without divine purpose behind it. The loss you're grieving today will be the reason you grow tomorrow. But for that growth to happen, God had to create space. And the moment you stop trying to reopen closed doors is the moment you begin to see why God closed them. What He removed was never meant to be permanent. What He's bringing next requires you to trust what He took away and trust what He's about to deliver. There are some weights you've been carrying that don't belong in your future. Old promises, old pain, old guilt, old attachments. God says, that season is over. Let it go. You cannot step into destiny while dragging what was meant to be left behind. The future God designed for you requires a lighter version of you, a healed version, a focused version, a wiser version. And that transformation cannot happen while you're still chained to what happened years ago. God knows your next season needs more strength, more clarity, and more emotional space. Every time God elevates you, He also requires you to shed something. Maybe it's a relationship that no longer aligns with your purpose. Maybe it's a mindset that keeps you small. Maybe it's a fear that has controlled your decisions for too long. But whatever it is, God says you can't take that with you. Your purpose is too heavy to carry unnecessary baggage. You can't run a new race with old weight tied to your ankles. You can't grow into the person you're meant to be while holding on to versions of yourself that no longer match your calling. So many breakthroughs are delayed, not because God hasn't prepared the blessing, but because you refuse to release what's holding you down. God can't fill a heart full of yesterday. He can't elevate someone who won't unclench their grip from the past. And when you finally release that weight, you'll feel peace you haven't felt in years. You'll feel clarity you didn't know you needed. You'll feel momentum returning to areas of your life that felt stuck. The future opens up the moment the past loses its grip. Some of the things you cried over were actually victories in disguise. What felt like rejection was really redirection. What felt like heartbreak was really protection. What felt like loss was God saying, I'm clearing what was blocking you. You didn't lose that relationship. You were rescued from a future that didn't match your destiny. You didn't lose that opportunity. You were pulled out of a situation that would have limited your growth. You didn't lose that friend. You simply evolved beyond what that relationship could hold. God sees the motives you couldn't see. God hears the conversations you never heard. God knows the truth behind every smile, every handshake, every promise. And when He pulls you away from something, it's because He was shielding you from something dangerous. Not every door that closes is an attack. Some doors close because God knows you would have stayed too long. Some doors close because God knows you were settling. Some doors close because the next room requires a different version of you. Instead of mourning what you think you lost, ask God what He protected you from. Perspective shifts everything. You'll begin to realize that certain endings were necessary for new beginnings to start. God can't bring you something better until the counterfeit leaves your hands. And once you see what God replaces it with, you'll thank Him for every moment you thought was painful. You'll understand why He had to take it. You'll understand that what looked like loss was actually the beginning of something greater forming behind the scenes. God rarely gives explanations. He gives instructions. And when He tells you to let go, He usually won't hand you a detailed plan. That's why letting go takes faith, not facts. You don't get the roadmap, you get the direction. You don't get clarity, you get a command, and faith is what bridges the gap. If you wait until you understand everything, you'll never move. God doesn't operate through certainty, He operates through trust. He won't always show you the destination before demanding a decision. Your obedience is the key that unlocks the revelation. Letting go forces you to walk into unknown territory. It pushes you to take steps that feel uncomfortable. It calls you to trust that God's vision for your life is bigger than your own. You don't have to see the whole path, just the next step. Every time you obey without understanding, God responds with provision. Every time you release without clarity, God responds with direction. Every time you trust without evidence, God responds with breakthrough. Faith moves first and God moves next. This is why obedience is so powerful. It positions you in places where the supernatural can happen. It places you in alignment with blessings you couldn't reach through logic alone. Faith goes beyond what makes sense and grabs what God promised. And when you look back, you'll realize that everything God asked you to release was connected to something He needed you to gain. The facts didn't make sense, but faith did. And faith is what led you exactly where you needed to go. God did not create you to live a small life. He didn't design you to shrink yourself just to fit into places that don't honor your purpose. So when you start settling for less than what He intended, He will shake your world until you move. There are situations you stayed in only because they were comfortable. You knew they weren't right, but they were familiar. And familiar feels safe. But safe and destined are not the same thing. God will make you uncomfortable to push you toward what's yours. Sometimes the discomfort you feel is not the enemy attacking you. It's God refusing to let you accept average. He knows what's inside you. He knows your potential. He knows your purpose. And He will disrupt your comfort whenever comfort becomes a cage. Letting go becomes a requirement when your environment stops matching your assignment, You can't stay in places where you're undervalued, underused, or spiritually asleep. God will stir something inside you that says, there has to be more than this. And he stirs you not because he's displeased, but because he's preparing you. He's pushing you toward a life that aligns with the gifts he placed inside you. He won't let you settle for less when he designed you for more. So when you feel that divine discomfort, pay attention. It's not punishment, it's preparation. It's God saying, you can't stay here. I have somewhere else for you. And the moment you understand that, letting go becomes easier. Letting go isn't always about releasing people or places. Sometimes it's about releasing control. You've been trying to fix everything, carry everything, and orchestrate everything. But there comes a moment when God says, let go. You can't play my role. You cannot control how people treat you. You cannot control every outcome. You cannot control every situation, no matter how hard you try. And the more you attempt to control what is not yours, the more exhausted, frustrated, and overwhelmed you become. Some of your stress isn't from life. It's from trying to handle things God never asked you to handle. You keep trying to force doors open. You keep trying to convince people to stay. You keep trying to change situations God already asked you to walk away from. Letting go of control is not weakness, it's surrender. It's saying, God, I trust your plan more than I trust my own. It's understanding that God sees what you can't see and knows what you don't know. And when you surrender control, you gain peace. Control restricts God's movement in your life. As long as you're holding tight, he can't move freely. But the moment you release your grip, God begins to orchestrate things in ways you never could. He aligns people, he opens doors, he shifts circumstances, and the peace you feel when you stop trying to control everything is undeniable. It's the kind of peace that reminds you that God has always been in the driver's seat. You just needed to stop grabbing the wheel. Before God takes you to the next level, he cleans your surroundings, he removes distractions, disrupts routines, and ends relationships that no longer serve your purpose. It may feel sudden, but it's always intentional. God clears your path before he elevates your life. Sometimes the clearing feels painful. Things you thought were permanent start falling apart. People you thought would walk with you start drifting away. Opportunities you believed were stable collapse overnight. But what feels like chaos is often divine organization. God removes what cannot go with you because your next chapter requires a different environment. Some people would have slowed you down. Some habits would have weakened you. Some places would have limited you. And God won't allow anything to compromise your calling. Every time something leaves your life, something bigger is on the way. God subtracts only to multiply. He removes only to replace. He shakes your world only to rebuild it stronger. Nothing he clears is unnecessary. Everything has purpose. The moment you accept that removal is preparation, you stop resisting. You stop fighting to keep what God has already released. You stop assuming endings or failures. You start trusting the process God is using to prepare your path. And the clarity that comes after God clears your life is powerful. You begin to see why certain things had to go. You begin to understand how cluttered your spirit had been. You begin to recognize that God was making room for elevation. Not everyone who started with you is meant to continue with you. Your next season requires a different level of support, focus, and alignment. And sometimes God says, let go of people. Not because they're bad, but because they're not built for where you're going. Some relationships drain you more than they grow you. Some friendships keep you stagnant. Some people love who you were, but they cannot handle who you're becoming. And God knows that the wrong circle can suffocate your calling. Your environment influences your elevation. If you surround yourself with small-minded people, you will shrink. If you stay connected to negativity, you will become discouraged. If you keep emotionally unavailable people close, you will question your worth. Letting go of people isn't easy, especially when history is involved. But loyalty to someone's past version of you cannot come before obedience to God's next version of you. You can love people and still release them. You can pray for people and still move on. Not everyone is assigned to every chapter of your life. Some were only meant for a season. Some were only meant to get you started. Some were only meant to teach you something. Your mistake is trying to make temporary people permanent fixtures. And when God transitions your circle, He sends people who speak life into your journey. People who push you. People who challenge you. People who help you grow. The right circle feels like alignment, not exhaustion. Some of you are holding on to old identities, versions of yourself that no longer match where God is taking you. You've carried labels that were placed on you. You've held on to beliefs about yourself that came from trauma. You've allowed fear to shape who you thought you needed to be. God says, let go of that version. I'm creating someone new. He knows your potential is far greater than the limitations you've accepted. The person you were was necessary for survival, but the person you're becoming is necessary for purpose. Identity breakthroughs often start with release. Release the belief that you're not enough. Release the insecurity that kept you silent. Release the lies that made you question your worth. Release the doubts that made you think small. Growth requires you to shed the outdated version of yourself. You cannot walk into a new assignment with an old mentality. You cannot experience new blessings with old thinking. You cannot live in purpose while still carrying fear from your past. Some breakthroughs are waiting on you to outgrow your own reflection. God isn't trying to change who you are. He's revealing who you've always beneath everything life placed on you. And when you begin to accept who He says you are, everything changes. The moment you release the version of yourself that was built from fear, pain, insecurity, and survival, you begin to step into the version built from strength, clarity, purpose, and calling. And that version is the one God has been waiting for. You cannot receive better while holding on to what's comfortable. Many people pray for new blessings while their lives are still full of old attachments. God says, make room. And making room requires release. You cannot carry increase with the same hands gripping yesterday. Some of the things you want, peace, clarity, elevation, purpose, require space. And as long as your heart, mind, and life are crowded with the unnecessary, God cannot place the extraordinary. Better requires emptiness. Better requires openness. Better requires surrender. Letting go is not a downgrade. It's preparation for an upgrade. God will never ask you to release something without having something greater prepared. But He cannot give you what's next if you're still clinging to what was. Your blessing is often delayed not because God hasn't sent it, but because you don't have room to receive it. You're trying to hold both the old and the new, and God says, choose. Choose alignment. Choose obedience. Choose growth. When you release what drains you, you create room for what restores you. When you release what limits you, you create room for what expands you. When you release what God never meant for you, you create room for what He always intended for you. And once you see the blessings that come after letting go, you'll realize that the release was not loss. It was strategy. It was setup. It was preparation for better things that your life couldn't hold before. Delayed obedience creates unnecessary pain. The longer you hold on to something God told you to release, the heavier it becomes. God says, let go, not because He's impatient, but because He knows staying attached will eventually break you. Some people stay too long in situations that God already exited from. You're trying to revive what He has already buried. You're trying to fix what He already replaced. You're trying to keep alive something that was never meant to be permanent. When God speaks, timing matters. The blessing is connected to the obedience, and the obedience is connected to the timing. The quicker you release, the quicker God can move. The quicker you surrender, the quicker He can elevate you. The quicker you trust, the quicker He can align your life. Holding on after God tells you to let go creates frustration. You'll feel drained, restless, and spiritually stuck. That's the sign that God is trying to shift you, but you're resisting the shift. Your peace struggles when your obedience is delayed. Letting go quickly doesn't mean you don't care. It means you trust God's view more than your emotions. It means you believe that His plan is bigger than your comfort. It means you understand that He sees the full picture while you only see one piece. And when you move in God's timing, everything begins to align. Doors open, opportunities form, peace returns, strength increases, clarity comes back. Because the moment you release what God asked for is the moment He releases what He prepared for you.